If you grew up in the 1970s, you probably experienced a summer break that was quite a bit different from what kids have today. Parenting standards in the 1970s required a lot less supervision, and kids were mostly left on their own to do what they wanted to do. Every summer, us 70s kids would enjoy a season of freedom and independence that helped us learn to navigate the world confidently and figure things out on our own. Join me as we take a trip back to see what summer break looked like for kids in the 1970s. To begin with, there were no 5th grade graduation ceremonies or kindergarten commencements. When that last bell rang, school ended and summer began. Of course, it didn't feel fully like summer until Monday morning came and you didn't have to go to school. If mom and dad both worked, you'd be on your own for the whole day. And if your mom didn't work, you'd still be on your own for the whole day because mom didn't want you sitting around the house. She wanted you out doing something. And if you didn't have anything to do, you better not say so. Otherwise, mom would be quick to find something for you to do. And you definitely did not want that. Two things we did not have in the 1970s were cell phones or supervised play dates. Kids were in charge of making their own friends, and we were more than comfortable going door to door to find some. Can Adam come out and play? If not, on to the next house. And if you didn't have any kids nearby, you'd be dialing them up from the phone in the kitchen. After you had some friends lined up, transportation was never a problem. Your ticket to ride was leaned up against the wall of the garage if it wasn't still laying in the yard from the day before. For kids today, their cell phone is probably their most essential possession, or their video game system, or their Adderall. But not for us. If you grew up in the 1970s, your single most important and necessary possession was your bike. On your bike, you could visit friends, explore your neighborhood or town, and go on adventures without relying on a ride from your parents. With high-rise handlebars and a banana seat, your bike could take you as far as you were willing to pedal. While the Schwinn Sting-Ray was the gold standard in banana seat bikes, those of us whose parents weren't rich would be riding a Huffy from Kmart or a Free Spirit from Sears. And over the course of a long 1970s summer, those Huffies and Free Spirits would be putting on plenty of miles. Depending on where you lived, there were usually a few parks or playgrounds pretty nearby. But back in the 70s, the playground was a little different from what kids have today. Today's playgrounds are usually made of plastic with easy-to-climb stairs, safety railings, and plastic slides that curve to slow you down. Not in the 70s. Playground structures used to be made out of metal, and they were meant to be climbed, and high. By the 1970s, most of this equipment had already been around for a while, which meant the colorful lead paint was usually flaking off, revealing more rust than the inside of your Partridge Family lunchbox. On a sunny day, the surfaces of those tall, straight steel slides could get up to 140 degrees, which meant some real burns on your legs if you were wearing shorts, which you probably were because it was summertime. Another playground favorite was the merry-go-round. You'd grab your spot on the metal platform, and before long, some older kids would be whipping that thing around so fast you were bound to get thrown off. Another common piece of playground equipment in the 1970s was the rocket ship slide. Often painted in red, white, and blue, these multi-level spaceships not only inspired the imagination, but a sense of patriotism too. Sadly, it seems they have all but disappeared. On those super hot days when the cicadas were buzzing and the sweat was streaming down the back of your tank top, there's nothing better than going swimming. Nowadays, it seems like every city and suburb has its own water park with multi-level water slides and a kiddie splash pad. In the 1970s, water slides were only found in tourist locations, and they were basically just concrete trenches dug into the side of a hill and slathered over with layers of lead paint. Nope. For most of us kids, the best option for cooling off in the summer is going to be the community pool. At the pool, you'd probably run into some of your friends from school. There might even be some girls there that you can impress by splashing them with water or by showing off some acrobatic cannonballs from the diving board. And speaking of diving boards, public pools in the 1970s had something you rarely see anymore, the high dive board. Now, climbing the high dive ladder wasn't a decision to be taken lightly. As soon as you got a few rungs up, you'd be locked in by a line of kids climbing up behind you. This meant that when you reached the top, there was only one way you were getting down, because you'd never hear the end of it from your buddies if you chickened out. Plus, one of those girls might be watching. Now, when you got bored of the playground and the pool, there was always more to discover. Country kids had fishing holes, forests, and even abandoned barns and houses to explore. And someone probably had a mini bike or three-wheeler to take out on the trails or race alongside the railroad tracks. But even for kids living in the suburbs, there was usually still some adventure left to be found. No matter where you lived, there was bound to be some small lake or pond with some sketchy rope tied to a tree that could swing you out into the water. You'd probably need to keep your shoes on to avoid broken bottles, but back on your bike in the warm sun, you'd be dry by the time you got home for dinner. It seems that any building kids do today is done by playing the video game Minecraft. Back in the 70s, we built things in real life. As long as we had a handsaw, a hammer, and some nails, we could pretty much build anything that we wanted. We built forts in the backyard, tree houses in the woods, and wooden go-karts that we'd tow behind our bikes or ride down neighborhood hills. These rickety little cars would be steered with a rope tied to either side of the front axle, and the one thing we never thought to put on them was a brake. And thanks to all the new construction that was going on at the time, finding lumber was never a problem. Do kids still build bike ramps anymore? Because back in the 70s, every kid built a bike ramp. We'd grown up watching Evel Knievel jump cars, buses, canyons, and fountains since we were little kids. We all had the Evel Knievel wind-up stunt bike, and by the time we were toddlers, we were attempting jumps on our big wheels. All you really needed for a bike ramp was a plank of wood and something to set it on, usually a cinder block, some bricks, or just some more pieces of wood. Then, you just need something to jump over. Evel jumped over cars, buses, and canyons. We'd start by jumping over some of our friends' bikes and move up to jumping over some of our friends. Back then, our parents weren't overly concerned about us kids attempting these bike jumps and other stunts. If they ever did tell us to stop, it was usually just so they could go grab their camera. I mean, who do you think it was taking all of these pictures? A popular place to catch up with friends during summer break was at the local roller rink. Ours was called Apple Rollerway. Every session I remember they'd do this thing called the snowball skate, where the DJ would send all the boys to one end of the rink and all the girls to the other. Then one of the two groups was chosen to skate across the rink and choose a skating partner to hold hands with during the slow song. If you didn't get picked for the snowball skate, it was the perfect time to grab a hot dog and a Coke or get in a game of foosball with your friends. Sadly, Apple Rollerway closed its doors for the last time back in the 1980s. However, the original wood skating surface can still be seen to this day as the floor of the Ace Hardware store that has since taken over the building. Back in the 70s, kids would travel the streets in packs, and occasionally, the pack would end up back at someone's house. It was always easy to tell which house that was. With no adults interfering, we could easily get a game of football or baseball going in the backyard, using frisbees or ice cream bucket lids for yard lines or bases. And if we were feeling brave, maybe even an innocent game of lawn darts. On really hot days, we would keep cool by running through the sprinklers or putting out the slip and slide, or maybe take a dip in the pool. Yeah, I wish. In my neighborhood, the pools generally looked more like this. Everybody in! Anytime us 70s kids got thirsty, There was only one thing to do.
Hey, cooler!
You thought I was going to say we drank out of the hose, right? Well, maybe as a last resort. To tell you the truth, though, this hardly ever worked. The Kool-Aid guy just had too many places to be back in the 70s. So yeah, we usually just drank out of the hose. There would always be a break in the action when dinner time rolled around. If you were lucky, Dad would be in a good enough mood to fire up the charcoal grill as he relaxed with a can of Miller Lite. Maybe he'd even share some with you. Then, as the sun began to set, you would gather up a group of the neighborhood kids for some more adventures before bedtime. Games like Kick the Can, Flashlight Tag, and Ghost in the Graveyard would have you running through the darkened backyards of your neighborhood as you did your best to stay quiet and not get found. On humid nights without a lot of wind, the lightning bugs would start coming out at around dusk. With a butterfly net and some patience, you'd be gathering up as many of these glowing beetles as you could, trying to create your own bug-powered lantern out of a mason jar with some holes in the top. When the final call to come inside was heard, you'd make your way back home and fall into your bed exhausted. With the fresh night air flowing in through the open window, you'd fall asleep to a soundtrack of chirping crickets, interrupted by the occasional jolt of a bug zapper. We had no idea at the time, but those summer days that seemed to last forever would be gone before we knew it. But they were sure great while they lasted. If you enjoyed this video, I bet you'll like this next one as well. Just click to watch.